Ads are coming to ChatGPT. Now, you did lay out a bunch of ways that you feel like you're doing this responsibly.
Yep.
But even with that, and some of the safeguards are things like, the ads are separate, the advertisers don't get to see your query, a bunch of things that I think, a lot of people would say are good proposals. But the mere introduction of ads does introduce a second customer. ChatGPT until now has been basically there to serve my needs. You guys have said we're not trying to maximize attention, all these things. How do you introduce ads and now have advertisers and not have a second interest?
It's a great question. So over the next little bit, and we shared this out last week, we are going to be, effectively conducting a series of tests. Those tests will be, through the prism of the principles that we outlined, and there's a number of them. But at the top of that is making sure that people authentically feel and genuinely feel that they're getting the answers that they want when they engage with chat. So the ads, in terms of how they'll show up, where they'll be, will be deprecated in terms of when you're interacting with chat. But I think those are the things that we're going to really want to learn as we go through these experiments to make sure it's actually delivering on the principles that we've articulated. I think amongst the other principles that we shared is that we do want people to have access to AI. And so just a little background, probably a lot of folks in this room know, we have roughly 850 million people who use chat on a regular daily basis. The vast majority of those are accessing the technology for free. We make it available for free, almost like it's a public utility out there. At some level, you do have to pay for the compute that makes that available. We started off when chat was released back in 2022, right, with which was Chat 3.5 with a subscription model at that time. And over the last several years, we have really sought to sort of diversify our business model. I think you can think of ads as one part. You've got subscriptions, you've got an API business, you've got enterprise, other things that will be coming. But I think most importantly, when you think about those ads, they will actually help create the revenue so that we continue to buy the compute that allows this technology to be made accessible in a free way to hundreds of millions of people around the world. And
certainly most of the consumer internet has been built that way, but a lot of people feel like if we had it to do over again, we wouldn't necessarily want an ad-sponsored internet. And obviously it does allow more people access, but OpenAI has been getting this question for years, and you've always said, we will consider it, but there's a lot of risks, there's a lot of things we'd have to think about first. And one person at OpenAI in 2024 said, I kind of think of ads as a last resort for us as a business model, and that was your boss, Sam Altman, in October of 2024, so not that long ago. It's a last resort. What changed?
I think it's really, as we've looked at what's happening with the technology, and you guys did some adroit reporting on this today, but we see what we have called a capability overhang out there. And let me unpack that a bit because it does relate specifically to the ads piece that you're asking about. What we're seeing is that technology continues to accelerate in terms of where it's going. Like, this is not a status quo technology. It's moving faster than really any sort of historical comparison you could make. But you're seeing it at the individual level, at the company level, and the country level, sort of this growing gap between those who are building the systems in and those that are not. Just to give a stat on this, our individual the power users are effectively getting a 7x multiplier versus a non-power user in terms of the economic productivity that they're able to generate. Think of that as their economic value.
So there's all this extra benefit there. Why would you need ads?
So where I'm going with this is that because we're very concerned that there is going to be a gap between those who have access to this and get trained on to use it and develop agency, and those who do not, it's more important than ever that we're going to need to be able to make sure that we're actually giving that baseline access. Like, we actually think that access to AI should be considered a basic right. And I think as we move in to the age of intelligence, beginning to understand and think about it as a basic right if you're going to be able to participate in the economics of the intelligence age. And so for us, the ads help ensure that we're able to pay for the compute that allows the innovation and allows the access for those users.
And should there be guardrails? I mean, a lot of things are based on voluntary commitments. You guys made a series of them around ads. But as we get these highly persuasive systems, today you're not doing that, but this could really help sell some things if they convince us. Should there be laws around what a chatbot can and can't do in terms of selling you stuff?
Yeah, I look at, first of all, I think that comes back, I think there's two levels. That one, I think to continue to get the type of audience, users, consumers that we currently have, you're going to have to maintain levels of trust. There are other options out there, and if people don't trust you, they will migrate to other places. So I think what we have seen and what we see from all of our data is that people do look at chat as something that is there to help empower their ability to think, to learn, to make, to create, and to produce. And if you lose that trust, in effect, you lose the social contract.
So the market will help sort it out.
So there's a market, but I'm also not going to sit here and just say the market is the only thing, right? We do think that you do need to begin to think about the types of standards that are going to exist out there in society. You know this because you cover this space well. US, UK, some other parts of the world have some cases voluntary US, some cases not voluntary EU. UK developed a set of safety standards for the catastrophic risk. I do think when you look at how that works, where the companies basically have to have their own sort of performance structure, they do evals, they then share those with those safety institutes to ensure that they are consistent with what's being reported.
But right now, there mostly aren't rules for ads.
But
like Meta's basically saying we'll use it for anything.
Right, where I'm going with it is that some of the questions you're asking, whether it's sycophancy, whether it is persuasion, yes, those are all built in, but you could see a world where you begin to actually extend and expand the types of standards, and you start to globalize those. And I do think, as you think about sort of the AI stack that gets built out globally, I do think that what will help facilitate that is, in effect, building those standards in. And I do think that what you're seeing on the catastrophic risk is a model that you could then begin to apply to these other areas.
All right. Well, I'll let you off the hook on ads, and we'll turn to a nice light subject.
Okay.
Geopolitics.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So as the U.S. becomes, I think we'd all agree, a little bit more confrontational, shall we say, on trade, technology, geopolitics in general, are American AI companies at risk? Is it going to be harder to do what you're trying to do of go around the world? I mean, you've been pitching, it's really important that U.S. and democratic values win over China in this battle. You've had a very successful OpenAI for Countries effort. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be tougher in 2026 to sell the world on U.S. technology when we're taking over Greenland, say?
Well, I will say that I've been here in Davos. I got here on Saturday night. I've been here for, I guess, a day and a half at this point. And I think I've already had 3 different, what you would call bilats with different countries that are interested in working with us, consistent with our OpenAI for Countries. By the way, for those interested, on Wednesday, we're going to be announcing sort of the next steps of OpenAI for Countries. We're currently working with more than 50 countries around the world on this. And I think, let me give an aspirational answer to this, or maybe at least a little bit more of an optimistic answer to your question. The reality is, and I say this with the utmost respect, there are 2 countries in the world right now that can build frontier models at scale, and that's the US and China, and you touched on that. Every country in the world understands that they need to build this version of our generation's version of electricity. These are the 2 countries that can supply it. But from that, you can then build your own sovereign inference models in your countries. Whether you're in the UK, Germany, Australia, Japan, you can build AI that's of, for, and by your country. And I do think that there is an understanding that countries want to get the quote-unquote electricity to then be able to build their own version of that, right? That involves localization, that involves data issues, that involves building into those inference models cultural and cultural context and values. And so I think where the world is right now is that they do have those 2 choices. Countries around the world would prefer to generally build on a model that's going to be much more open, much more transparent, and ultimately designed and built to empower individuals as opposed to more autocratic versions. And so, yes, we are in a geopolitical moment. There are a lot of issues going on. I'm sure there will be interesting activity on Wednesday. But at the end of the day, people understand that they need this technology. The companies like OpenAI are committed to being able to provide it in a way that's really consistent with that country's best interest and their values. And we're going to continue to do that. And maybe the most aspirational piece of this that I will try to bring is that maybe AI serves as actually the rails and channels for these different countries to be able to actually work together, in what is a very potentially transitional moment on those geopolitics, because the world is going to have to be picking between democratic AI and autocratic AI.
ChatGPT was right about him, weren't they? Anyway, one of the things that we're trying to do in Davos every year, one of the nice things about it being in January is we kind of get a chance to look at what's the year ahead? Where are we going? And I'm sure you'll get this question a couple times. Where are we going? What can we expect to see in 2026 in AI generally and from OpenAI that maybe wasn't a part of our reality last year?
Yeah, remember a year plus ago, right? If you had said agentic AI, people would have had no real idea what you were talking about. And now, people are all over the world are doing vibe coding. I had mentioned this earlier. It is our focus for 2026, which is closing that capabilities overhang. But there are specific areas where we think you will see the closing of that. The first is in health. AI can have a really significant impact on the ability of an individual to navigate the healthcare system, whether it's dealing with insurance companies, whether it's trying to understand information that's been provided to them. We see all sorts of interesting data about how folks in healthcare deserts are actually relying, on AI, particularly chat, to help support them. For primary care providers, doctors, nurses, right? This allows you to save enormous time. It helps you be able to then allocate more and more of your time to direct patient care. So I think healthcare is going to be an area where you see a lot. We have a lot of conviction that 2026 is going to be the year where you really see some scientific advances and progress in terms of where the technology is going and its ability to unlock scientific discovery. I think a third area is seeing companies really building this in from an enterprise perspective, both big companies, but in particular small companies. Like, this is a barrier reducing technology. It is, if used the right way, for the little person. You could be the wealthiest person in the world or just a typical normal person, and you have your phone, but you're going to have equal access to a really, really, really powerful technology. And I do think big business, but also really small businesses. And then the last piece I would just flag is devices. Obviously,
I think
you guys have covered
Sam and Johnny Ive are cooking up something. It's a pin, right?
I will let you make the news for it at some point much later in the year.
But this year. We're going to see it this year.
I think most likely. That's, we're looking at something, latter part, but, we will see how things advance.
Well, you literally heard it here first. It's coming this year.
Well, I didn't say it's coming this year. I said we're on track.
And it's an earpiece, you said? And then lastly, you're a politics guy, not really my thing, but you recently wrote, I think just a little bit ago, about some advice of what candidates need to do to run a campaign. I think 2026, I hope, in addition to your device, it's also a year we see elections in the United States. Assuming we see elections, what do you think candidates should do with AI? And do you think we'll see elections?
Yeah, so I released really yes, we will see elections.
Excellent, that's
I'm definitely not making news on that. So a little context here, which is, Ina knows this, I used to do politics as a full-time job. And so I continue to get a lot of folks who call and will ask for thinking and thoughts in a campaign context. And really, over the holidays, had a number of folks who are running for fairly high-profile jobs on the ballot in the U.S. In the 2026 election. And they were really asking a basic question, which is, thus far in the AI conversation, they had been presented really two fairly extreme binary choices on how they should be thinking about AI from a policy and really a campaign perspective. On one hand, you sort of had the hand wavers, nothing to worry about here, everything is going to be great. You'll be playing video games for a living. You'll be on a permanent vacation, right? You're going to have an incredible life. And then on the other extreme, a doomer perspective, which effectively is this elitist and, in my view, undemocratic perspective, which is that this technology is so dangerous that only a small number of people should control, and that should be us. And those are really unsatisfying to voters. Voters in the U.S., if you are looking at polling, would say we want the U.S. has to prevail against China. We do think investing in AI is in the best interest of the U.S., but we also want to know, are we going to get our piece? How's it going to impact? Is it going to actually create economic opportunity for me and my family, my kid? Is my kid going to be safe? We've touched on that. Am I going to be paying more in electricity costs for this? And so in response to that, I actually wrote a memo over the holiday. Chat did help me because it was originally some texts and then some emails, and I just sort of dumped it into chat and said, well, put this into an agenda. And it really came out with a vision and a version that is almost like an AI populist agenda. And it has a number of pieces in there. It talks about how AI should be a right. It talks about how the U.S. should have a goal of getting everyone literate, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and AI literacy, because you need that literacy if you're going to even have any opportunity to take that access and then translate it into economic benefits. Talks about maybe beginning to rethink corporate structures so that the public's interest is more aligned with the private sector's interest as they build this out. It has the kids' safety piece in it, and it even talks about this idea, this is U.S. data, $144,000 is what folks have identified in the U.S. is what it really takes for a family to live a middle-class life. The median family income right now is about $75,000. I think that explains a lot about some of the dynamics that exist in the U.S. and in the U.S. the belief that the American dream is not there and concerns about the establishment. And what the piece suggests is, why don't we take that $144,000 and actually make that like a goal for the country, right?
Why doesn't Sam just give us that?
So I talk about that a little bit, right? In the corporate design, I made the point that almost a third of OpenAI, from an ownership perspective, is controlled by a nonprofit. When we announced that and went through the restructure, created what is now the second largest nonprofit in history, right? That nonprofit is effectively taking the upside of OpenAI and allocating it to deliver and serve the public good. I'm not saying
could it provide AGI, or that's not really what it's.
Well, I mean, the mission of
not AGI, UBI. Could it provide basic income, or that's not really?
I think what we're focused on is how you actually take access and then empower people so that they can create their own economics. I do think we fundamentally believe that there is a certain integrity to work and integrity to labor. And if you look at what I outlined, what it really addresses is that really over the last 20, 25 years, there has been a real imbalance, if you think about the theory of the value of labor, between capital and labor, with capital increasingly getting more and more power.
Seems to make it much worse.
Well, so the point here is that unless we do something now to get that balance more calibrated, so that you're actually giving people who are delivering labor more of a stake in this, it's going to be very difficult for folks to actually get their fair chance in this economy. And if we don't do this now in some kind of a pre-distributive way, we're going to miss that shot.
Yeah, and Marie Antoinette, bad things happened.
Well, I mean, I saw someone, the other day suggest, well, you can get your jobs, you can become a minister or a rabbi, or you can become a professional athlete. Like, that to me was a version of let them eat cake, right, for this age. Like, I do think we have to start to get this.
Well, for you and I think priest and rabbi might have been the only
that may have been the yes. But that's a whole separate conversation. We'll have to take offline. But
I would love to chat with Chris all day. I think we are out of time. I know some folks, it looks like, are eager to chat with Chris. I think he's going to stay for a few moments. Let's please not swamp him, but let's thank him for being such
Thanks,
a
everyone. Thanks
guest.
for having me.